Hi, I'm Leah Brick, Executive Director for SASH, and I'm here today for another Conversations from the Couch with Patrick Hentsch. Patrick, welcome. So glad that you're joining us. We're going to be talking today about your presentation, and you're doing something a little bit different that you haven't done with us before, and that's a moderated table discussion. Those are always exciting to our attendees. And let's talk about your title, An Emotional Developmental Model of Intimacy. You're doing that on Thursday, October 15th at 5:30 Central, and then a repeat on Friday, 10:16 at 4 o'clock. Tell us some more about your presentation and what the inspiration is behind it.
Great. Yes, thank you. Well, it's a pleasure to be here first, and I'm looking forward to this very much. Love the moderated table discussion format because I look forward to a slightly more personal contact, more interactive. I know the title's a mouthful. It's based off of I would call it a visual model that I came up with about intimacy, and of course I'll be sharing that visual with everyone, and it's really born out of the work I've been doing in my couples counseling with my clients. So it has an empirical basis to it, and through that experience working with couples, coming to identify some underlying themes that seem to show up again and again consistently in the distinction between content versus process. This is very much about process. So often, couples bring content to the session. Most of the disagreements or conflicts that are needing resolution are content-based or content-focused. But what I found is that in spite of the variety of content, I started to see the commonalities of process. And of course, in couples work, it's about relationship, it's about connection, it's about intimacy ultimately. So what's consistent is, in my observation, is partners, partners, couples really ultimately are trying to connect. And so this is really about, how humans are trying to be successful at connecting. And so, of course, I think this is relevant to this conference because sexuality, I think is a very important, but an important subset of connection. It's one of the ways we connect. It's one of the ways intimacy is experienced or created or manifested. It's not the only one. So I think some of the principles in the model are highly relevant, to sexual intimacy and sexual connection. But it goes beyond. And so really I, over time, started to discern some, what I would call fundamentals or first principles that seem to inform those underlying dynamics really between partners. So, of course, I'm tempted to go deep into it and end up presenting the whole thing today, but I know this is just a brief intro.
This is just a little teaser to get people to
Right,
come. We want
right.
them to come to your table and have a discussion with you. And, in that discussion, I think it's important to talk about that connection and the intimacy between the partners and why that's so important to sexual health. I mean, why do you think your topic and
Yeah,
specifically intimacy in the coupleship is important to sexual health?
absolutely. And so I think one of the fundamental discernments about my model is that we all exist in our own our own individual paradox, which is that we exist both as individual beings, or we have an individual nature, and we also have a social or collective nature. And really finding the balance between honoring both truths about our existence is tricky. If we take the extremes, if we honor the individual, which is highly valued in our culture, the individualism, and of course central to self-actualization and a lot of the work we do in the helping profession. But if we honor that exclusively, we can end up with what I call the antisocial rebel, the isolated rebel. So I can be very true to myself, but at the expense of any kind of connection or belonging. And if we go all the way to the other extreme, we have what I might call the selfless conformist. So the person who who totally belongs and fits in, but has lost self. And sometimes we call that also codependence. And so I think the balancing those potential opposites is tricky, and that really shows up in connection, in intimacy, because before we go to collective, we have the dyad. The first connection I make is to another person, as I move past the self, and then that expands into collective. So really the paradox we're all negotiating is, how do we connect while honoring and preserving the authentic self, and at the same time succeeding at connecting. Because when we look at individuality, what we have is authenticity, but it also means uniqueness, and it also means diversity. So in a sense, each individual, it is a culture unto him or herself.
Sure.
And we're talking about how to bridge two cultures. So that applies, this of course applies between, interpersonal dynamics, but the principles actually extend to, when societies are trying to connect different social groups. And if by definition each culture is unique and there's diversity, it means that there is difference. So one of the reflexes we have as humans, I think, is to connect over similarity. We find similarity to be a very natural point of connection. It's non-threatening, it's sameness. And that's, that's easy enough. But the challenge is, how do we connect over differences? And so what I see a lot in couples is fundamentally, they're trying to figure out how to connect over differences, or even just coexist with differences, because differences, implicitly can be threatening to connection. And often where there's a difference, so I see couples do this, if they're not too aware, so many of the dynamics are about consciously or unconsciously perceiving the differences, and often it's a difference in value systems. What matters to me, and how many conflicts are about, I want to convince you that what matters to me should matter to you the same way it matters to me, and what matters to you actually doesn't matter, right? And so we get into these terrible conflicts that actually never resolve, because they only do if there's a power difference that emerges, someone who's right and someone who's wrong. And we've all heard the saying, you can be right or you can have a relationship, but not both. So the connecting over difference, right? And experiencing the diversity as the point of connection instead of the threat to connection.
Mhm.
And but that's where the risk lies, because when the differences are acknowledged, um, there is that risk of power, power battles, power differences. There is the risk of, if the belief is that connection occurs over similarity, um, then the differences are approached as problems, and there will be, someone's going to have to relinquish part of their authenticity.
Mhm.
And very hard to create or experience intimacy when either partner is not bringing their authenticity to the table anymore. So how do we show up authentically, which means with the differences, and connect without the threat of, I suppose, in a sense, without the threat of annihilation.
Sure, and
Um,
there's that inherent risk of being vulnerable, and maybe where our differences lie is that I want to try something new and I'm afraid that you're not going to want to be involved in that, or maybe I like things status quo and you want something different, and so that
mm,
inherent risk of being vulnerable in a very intimate relationship. I mean, where can you be more intimate than when you're completely shed of any clothing and you are in your natural self, and you're at your most vulnerable.
exactly, exactly.
What do you
And
hope that participants will take out of this presentation? I mean, obviously it's different than any other presentation because you're really having a dialogue with them. That's the way moderated table discussions are set up, so that it's not a lecture and you really get to have some great dialogue with your participants. What do you hope that they'll take away from it?
yes, I hope so. I hope that they take away a grasp, a working understanding of the visual model that they will be presented with. Uh, as professionals, I hope that model serves uh, in whatever capacity, but I hope that it offers. I mean, it's in a sense it's quite analytical. It's pretty applicable. So it can really inform couples work, or anywhere that humans are trying to connect and maybe having some difficulty connecting well. Um, so I definitely hope that they find themselves having another tool that could be useful. But I also hope that through our experience together, through the discussion, I also hope that there's a very personal connection to the material, because I think, um, well, I don't think, I know that we're all humans, and that as a result of that, we've all had our own journey around connection, intimacy, and the injuries that inform how we proceed or don't proceed with connecting. So I do hope participants really connect the material to their own stories, their own experiences, um, and hopefully maybe frame their own belief systems and even behaviors and habits, with this new perspective that I hope is meaningful.
Yes.
Um, and I think if they do, I think it also makes it more meaningful as a tool later on to refer to in any professional work.
Absolutely. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this is your first time presenting at the SASH conference, isn't that right?
That is right. Yes, it is the first.
So
Yeah.
tell me, what are you most excited about when you think about the SASH conference? What excites you about obviously we're in a virtual world, so that's something completely new for us.
Mhm.
But other than that, what are you looking forward to most with the SASH conference?
Well, I'm very grateful and excited, passionate to be able to share my work and my ideas with a broader audience. Um, and this is something I've been sort of doing in other contexts, but as a CSAT, a lot of my work is vested in sexual health, sexuality, and all that. So I'm just excited. I hope, I won't presume, but I hope that what I have found to be very valuable to myself can also be that to other people in this field. Um, and I'm also very much looking forward to it's the cross fertilization.
Yes, absolutely.
I my presentation's about connection, but my my personal investment is also about connection. So I look forward to connecting as a presenter, but I also look forward to connecting with uh, other colleagues, work, ideas, talks, and to the extent that we maybe there's interaction, or we might call it networking. It's the connection,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
and not just not random connection. I know I talked about connecting over similarities versus differences. Um, I expect that there will be connections made over similarities because we have a shared. I mean, SASH being an organization, we come to it with, I think, some shared
Yes.
principles or beliefs, but I also hope for the stimulation of differences, of new points of view. Uh, I hope to have my own horizons expanded by the conference. I've signed up for the whole conference. Hope to hear as many talks as I
Yeah.
can.
And there are so many diverse presentations this year. I think that's one of the exciting things is that we're really bringing in some folks that like yourself that have never been part of the SASH conference before that are really giving us some new material and opening the world for our attendees. I think that's a really wonderful thing that clinicians such as yourself will be able to experience. And as you mentioned, it's harder in this virtual world to have that connection, to be able to network, and yet we're still able to do it. And I think one of the major advantages is here we are, you're in Texas, I'm in Georgia, and we're able to see each other, develop a quasi relationship, if you will, even though it's virtual, and really begin to have some experience with each other. What have you found are some benefits for you in this new platform that we're in? We've been in it now for quite a number of months, and I don't know how much of your world was online already. So maybe it's not that new for you. Are there benefits that you're seeing?
Very interesting point, full of paradox too, of course. I personally, was very much favoring uh, personal contact. So I by choice, prior to the pandemic, I wasn't encouraging or facilitating too much telehealth, although a little bit, because sometimes clients form a rapport and then they move, and it's been very beneficial to be able to continue the work that way. But as a rule, I was very much leaning towards in person, and as an essential service here in Texas, I was even able to continue providing in-person uh, sessions with my clients, those who chose to. I was relatively surprised that, you know, a fair number braved it and continued coming.
Wow.
But then there was also, of course, you know, a good portion that migrated online. And it's been a very interesting experience because I think first I would say I was favorably surprised by how effective it is compared to what I maybe expected. There are, of course, limits as well. You know, I've never had a client show up to a telesession showing me more than above the waist. so you know, I get half of the nonverbals I used to,
Yes.
but that's okay. And if the you know, if the rapport is already established, I think I find it to really actually work pretty well. And on the other hand, you know, it's created new possibilities, new opportunities, and I'm realizing that probably clients who were, you know, making an additional effort because maybe the commute was, you know, not the easiest for them. You know, I have clients who come from relatively afar. I suspect they'll find that, you know, continuing this way makes more sense to them. And that could create a lot. It's an irony, right? Because if clients encounter some degree of stress because they have to, you know, leave to arrive on time, and there's the commute, and then they have to drive back. I mean, sometimes the getting to the session and returning from the session ends up taking as much or more time than the session itself.
Sure.
And that, you know, might generate some stress that they may discover it was not necessary. And so in a sense, possibly could be more therapeutic for people in that situation to get, you know, get their session in a more relaxed way from the comfort of their home and what have you.
It's a double-edged sword, don't you think? Because if I have the stress of having to get to my therapist and driving there, but yet if I have an intense session, then I have the ability to drive back and reprocess that and get myself in the right frame of mind, where if I'm in my own home and my family is in the other room, or they're upstairs and I'm downstairs doing my session with you, now I have minutes to get myself together.
Very true. Very true. And you're right, it does depend on, you know, what kind of work opens up in the session. And so I would say, yes, you know, I think that's a pretty astute distinction. And I would say that I don't know if all of my colleagues see it this way, but you know, I sort of acknowledge a couple of different modes, if you will, for sessions. The counsel. So maybe I'll use two terms. You know, the sessions that are counseling, and then there are sessions that are healing.
Yes.
So a healing process, and so I will, you know, I will concur with you. I think the counseling's gone really quite seamlessly well with telehealth. I do also think that the healing sessions haven't been happening the same way, and I don't. And you're right, to your point. You know, I'm not sure that I even want to move into that kind of session over a screen. And it's not just there's definitely the transition, you know, the commute for the clients, post-processing and so on. But I also believe, and this is personal belief, but I think if we distinguish between, you know, I think there are two modes to our existence, doing and being. And culturally, we are very at home with doing. In fact, collectively, we may have forgotten a little bit what being truly means. So we end up in this strange oxymoron where as a culture, we're so doing oriented that from that mental place, we suddenly realize, oh, one of the things I need to be doing more is to be. And so now we engage in being, but as a subset of doing, right? So we have sort of, high performance mindfulness and other strange oxymorons. So I think we're not very good at being. And I think a big part of being is nonverbal. I think it's energy. I literally think emotions are energy. I literally think when two humans are in the same space, that there is an exchange of energy that I don't believe carries over the internet. And so I think for some of the healing, I think healing has a lot to do with being rather than doing. When I have, physical wounds that are healing, it's not what I do as much as being, right? My body has the space to heal. So yes, that is true. And I think the healing work probably doesn't translate well to Zoom. So I know I will continue to really want the in-person work to continue. And at the same time, I acknowledge that there's some possibilities that may not have been there.
Yes.
That this allows, and I think we're discovering those.
Well, and you're talking about being versus doing, and it makes me think about balance, and to me, balance, especially in this environment, I'm living in this square
Yeah.
where this is our connection with each other within this box. And so how do I bring that balance, that being, that centeredness to myself when I'm spending so much time virtually? And I would bet that you have similar things to me where I find I've got to get outside. I need to get into nature. That's part of me being at peace and bringing that centeredness back to myself so that I can sit in this box for hours at a time sometimes.
Absolutely. I very much relate to that. And the concept of balance, is central to everything. Well, in fact, it's a central, part of what I'll be presenting. So, and balance is, so yin and yang, and balance is always about what potentially looks like an opposite. So I do relate to that. And yes, I think literally, literally in terms of field of view, like you were saying about the box, there's a huge difference between being in a space with a client where, granted, perhaps my optical focus, has a certain field of view, but my peripheral vision takes in the whole space.
Yes.
And that doesn't make sense on Zoom because the peripheral vision is boundaried, like you say, by the box.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have found that, I think I'm talking about a literal visual thing here, but I think it also translates into something more abstract, which is that probably my brain starts to mimic what my eyes are doing, and so I have felt the need to re-expand my peripheral vision.
Mm-hmm.
And it has been exhausting to essentially shrink reality to a rectangle.
Yes.
And like you know, I've become aware of the need to balance that, because I didn't, you know, spend as much time like this. And so, yes, I've actually been kind of going back to analog, if you will, but, you know, where in the past I might, because I do, you know, I have a lot of hobbies, and, you know, I draw and I do things like that. But, you know, where in the past I might have automatically gone into Adobe Illustrator to, you know, to draw.
Mhm.
I now find that I just want to go grab my graphite pencil, um, have a large sheet of paper bigger than any computer screen I've ever had, and really, you know, draw, like scratch a
Yes,
piece of,
yeah, I can really appreciate what you're saying as you're talking about it. I'm thinking about that tactile sensation,
right,
that need to touch something, to have that experience of that connection with even just a pencil,
exactly, exactly,
and not have it be my mouse.
absolutely, absolutely. Because, you know, one of the things that shows up in my work is the fact that well, many of my clients, and I'm going to include myself, and I think there's a cultural piece. It's really easy to float up into the head and to forget that there's more to reality than what the mind's doing. And for example, the emotions occur in our bodies, not, I mean, there's a mental part to it, but when we're really connecting with an emotion, uh, you know, we and mindfully, we will notice that there's literally some physiological sensations going on somewhere in the body, and we have, you know, wonderful, rich language, metaphoric language for that, butterflies in my stomach and stuff. But it's no accident. I literally, so when we're disembodied, or disconnected from the embodied senses, um, you know, I think there are, it doesn't matter if we're doing therapy, you know, on a screen. Like, ultimately, part of therapy is to reconnect to ourselves. And so
Right.
I think we need to go back into our bodies and get to the senses. Like, we don't have smell. Like, Zoom is basically sight and sound,
Yes. Yes.
and, and narrow,
And
right?
sometimes not even sight if somebody has their camera off.
That's true, exactly. And we don't even have, technically, we don't even have the full audio range. You know, we have some signal degradation, or we have, you know, some frequencies are probably not transmitted as well. So we basically have this narrowed down field of view and hearing, and we lose touch with sensation, smell, taste, you know, all the other senses that are part of existing. So yeah, so you know, I'm more intentionally reading books instead of Kindle, things like that, and definitely stepping out, you know, stepping out into nature.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, I know there are some amazing, you know, sunsets on my wallpaper, and you know, and so on. But and they may be more spectacular than any sunset I actually ever see in life. But it's not the same as
It's not the same. We were talking before we started about fall. Both of us are experiencing
yes,
fall, and it is not the same for me anyway as walking outside and smelling the leaves. And I can, you know,
right,
they're beginning to fall, excuse me, and they're beginning to turn, and walking outside and smelling people's fireplaces going because it's getting
absolutely,
cooler and they're
exactly. It's
these,
all the senses,
yeah.
and sort of, you know, in an integrated, holistic whole,
Mhm.
without, and none of those sensory inputs are framed, like they're all 360.
Right, right,
Yeah.
right. Well, I just want to thank you so much for your time today and spending just a very brief few minutes talking about your presentation, talking about some connection and intimacy and how we bring that back into our lives. And I'm looking forward to your presentation and learning more about your model, but also just really thinking about all of that tactile connection that we need with each other. So, to remind our viewers, your presentation is an emotional developmental model of intimacy. It's a moderated table discussion that you'll be doing on Thursday, October 15th at 5:30 Central Time, and Friday, October 16th at 4 p.m. Central Time. Thank you
Yes.
so much for your time today and spending a little bit of your day with us at Conversations from the Couch.
Thank you, Leah.